Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another workshop from Pivot. My name is Arjun, and I'm here to discuss a very important career-related topic today, with many of mid-career professionals experience at some point. The infamous mid-career crisis, and that's something which has been increasing in frequency, increasing in volume for many professionals across the globe today because of the unprecedented amount of change that's happening in terms of how companies hire employees, how they have been terminating or laying off employees, how people collaborate, the kind of new technologies that are rapidly evolving, and how employees make use of those technologies to advance their career or sometimes get left behind. So there's a lot of new changes and developments on the horizon which are impacting how people lead their professional lives. And so for us to discuss that today, we have two brilliant speakers. We have Mr. Sandeep Suri and Ms. Bhavana Angadi, who are both here backstage, and I'll be bringing them up just in a second. But we will be helping anybody who is, let's say anywhere between 3 4 years experience in their career, all the way till near their retirement. Anyone within this space who's considering what their next steps should be to optimize their future career path, that's what we'll be discussing. So just hold on for a second. We'll bring both of them up to the stage. All right, perfect. So, welcome, Sandeep and Bhavna. Thank you so much for being here, for doing this with me. Um, I think, Bhavna, you and I have connected and spoken a few times before.
Yeah.
So, really appreciate you doing this again. It's always a pleasure. And Sandeep, I know this is our first time collaboration, but I'm really looking forward to, learn a lot about your background and all your experiences and insights. So, thanks again
Thank
for
you, Arjun,
joining.
for having me. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Arjun.
Um,
Yes.
so what we can do is maybe start with a quick round of intros. I can go first, and then I'll turn it over to you both. So for those who don't know me, my name is Arjun, and I'm the founder and CEO at Pivot, which is a startup that helps people make smooth career transitions. So what that means is, anytime a person is thinking about not just changing their job, but making some core element shift in their profile. It could be your domain, your industry, your level in the organization, or perhaps you're returning to work after a little bit of a gap. So there are different types of inflection points that people go through, and that's where we really specialize. We help people navigate these inflection points in a successful and smooth manner. We'll talk more about how we do it and exactly what the process looks like during the course of this conversation. But for now, what I would do is turn it over to Bhavna. Bhavna, thanks again for joining, and if you could just share a little bit about your journey and what you do today, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Arjun, and the whole Pivot team for having me here, possibly for the third or fourth workshop. So, super excited to be here as always. So, I'm Bhavana Angadi, and I think Arjun summarized my journey in one line very beautifully today. So, I'm a software engineer turned product manager turned entrepreneur now. So, I recently did my MBA and it made me question a lot of things about the work that I have been doing so far and what kind of job or what do I really want to do in life. It was the responsible management course, which made me question about work and life in general. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sitting here today as well, because I have been able to pivot in multiple roles across industries, and I would love to share my journey with all of the registrants here. Thank you.
Short and sweet. Great. Thanks, Bhavna. And then we will also have Sandeep. You, please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Arjun, for having me. And good evening, good morning. I don't know where all you guys are sitting, but good to see you guys. I am Sandeep Suri, close to about 31 years of experience, largely worked with financial services companies. I was the country head for Fidelity Investments based out of Dublin, Ireland. Came back to India a couple of years ago. But before that, I worked for companies like Dell, GE, Grindlays Bank, which is Standard Chartered Bank in India now. Uh, have had an opportunity to work in multiple cities, countries, and led large teams. After I came back to India, I pivoted, to use the same term what Arjun actually used for his company. I pivoted and I decided to be a kind of consultant and help people in pivoting their career. I work for a company called Positive Momentum, which is based out of London now. It's a boutique consulting firm. We are largely into CXO level of coaching and mentoring. But also as a side gig, I do help people in kind of getting to the point, where they want to be ultimately, which is largely into coaching and mentoring, and do
Mhm.
help in setting up those things for people. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, Arjun and Bhavna. Love to kind of get started as soon as possible.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sandeep. And seems like, all of us have that, multi-dimensional sort of experience in different areas. All of us have made some sort of a pivot in our journey. So I'm really excited for that, because every time we do this, it's always good to have conversations with people who have, not just like a narrow vision of, looking at things from one vantage point, but rather from different angles. And that really enhances the discourse significantly. So I'm really glad to have you both. Um, let's get started. So, we are talking about navigating a mid-career crisis. It kind of gives it a negative spin. So, I want to start with a few positive things actually before we, talk about people perhaps feeling stuck and all of that, that's happening in the market today. I started my career in US, okay, and it was happening right after the financial crisis, and things were not as kind of murky as they are today in terms of job market, but things were still pretty bad. And at that time, I saw a lot of my friends who were graduating from New York University going back to India after graduation just because there were hardly any jobs being given to immigrants at that time, similar to what's happening today. But I kept trying, and after a lot of trying, maybe getting almost 60, 70 rejections, I finally cracked a very good consulting opportunity. And after that, I cracked another financial services opportunity. In fact, it was at Fidelity, I believe, Sandeep. So it's interesting. I decided to go into consulting at the time because I didn't love finance, unfortunately, but it worked. And then fast forward to 2018, I had spent about a decade in US, and I decided that I wanted to move back to India, right? At that time, I had never worked in India. I had zero network professionally in India. um, I was applying to job boards on, the typical large ones, not hearing back at all, complete crickets. And I had one meeting with a professional who was my connection in US, who had migrated recently from India. She ended up setting five meetings, or she basically circulated my profile, which ended up setting five meetings, and I got three offers within a month.
Wow.
Another breakthrough story, right? This is just my example.
Yeah.
And I've seen time and time again where people start to lose hope because they get so many rejections in their career. But what I've realized is, and that's part of the process, it's not something that happens only to one individual, it happens to almost everybody. And that's why I want to start with the story is, to me, a crisis is when you feel emotionally and mentally that things around you are not going as per plan, and you're getting rejections, you're getting ghosted, and all of those things. So firstly, I wanted to define, especially from both of your vantage points, what do you think is a crisis when it comes to a mid-career crisis, right? Just a simple question. So maybe, Sandeep, we'll start off with you, if that's okay.
Sure. Look, I think you alluded to this at the beginning of our conversation. Research clearly shows that mid-career crisis is now kind of becoming a big thing, and there are multiple reasons. And I'm not going to be getting into the reasons of that right now. But to me, midlife crisis is something where you are at a point where you are not clear that what you want to do, or what your vision is, or maybe what you're passionate about, what your skill sets are. It's very fuzzy, it's very hazy at this point in time. And then you realize that, okay, I am not very happy with my job, with my role, with my organization, with my boss. Anything and everything around you uh, kind of sounds and looks very negative. And that's the time you yourself start getting into a negative spiral, and you realize that I'm not worth it. I'm a bad manager, or a leader, or a worker. And all those kind of negative feelings start creeping in, right? And it becomes a huge issue for the person in question. And as a result, you start wandering around that what is the right strategy for me. And we'll talk about the strategy in a minute. But for me, what is really important, and how I really define this is when you are not clear, when it is very fuzzy, and when you are thinking about it, there could be alternatives for me, but I am not able to kind of take that step for multiple reasons. So that's where you feel stranded, you feel stuck, you feel that, oh, there are people who are my peer group or my college mates or my ex colleagues are doing much better than what I am today. So it's not a good feeling to have, right? And as a result, you are going back to your own little cocoon or shell, and then without realizing the fact that it's happening to me, right? And before somebody starts observing that there's a problem with this guy. And I think I always tell people this is a kind of situation that we tend to deny, and we are almost every time in a denial mode. No, I'm perfect. No, you're not. Because people within your household, people in society, among your friend circles, are observing your behaviors, and that shift that is happening, which you may not be noticing today, but somebody else is observing, and we keep saying, no, I'm fine. But no, the earlier we accept it, the better it is.
Right, right. Yeah, I think those are very good indicators for why you might be facing a crisis. But I also want to, Bhavna, get your perspective on this, and feel free to answer the question in just a very simplistic manner as to how you would define a crisis. But I would also love to understand from your experience. Have you yourself, or perhaps have you seen around you specific examples which you called out as a crisis, or you thought that yes, this is what a person going through a crisis looks like?
Yes. So I did my MBA in London. Last year I completed it and I applied to 800 jobs. Okay, it was applying to jobs left, right, and center on all job portals, and I cracked two offers at the end. So that was a real job crisis. That's what I would say. Because after, let's say, doing engineering, working as a product manager at Big Basket, having really a very nice LinkedIn profile, doing MBA, getting distinction grades, and still not getting a job in London. So that was like a job crisis point for me last year. But now I'm no longer in that job crisis. That's why I'm happy to say that. I do not want to be in that situation again, and I don't want any of us to be in that situation again. So, in one sentence, if I have to say what crisis means is lack of fulfillment. Okay, if I have to look back, maybe after 10 years, if I have to look back and say, okay, uh, am I proud of the work that I did? Will my parents be proud about it? Or will I be proud to tell my children that, okay, this is what I built, this is how it made an impact to the world, a positive difference to the world. So that's when I got the question, okay, am I in the right direction? So that was the real crisis example in my life last year. And right now, my definition would be a lack of fulfillment, because job satisfaction and life satisfaction are directly related. They are correlated. I mean, for those who are little math freaks, there is a coefficient of zero point 0.6. So it is very much directly correlated.
I would also like to add a couple of more things, Arjun.
So,
Let me just step back. When you are straight out of college and you're looking at, in Bhavana's episode actually triggered this thought. When you're straight out of college and you're looking for jobs, there are two reasons, we join a specific job, largely speaking. One is I'm passionate about it, or I have the skill set that I'm carrying with me, or I just like the company, I just like the brand, right? So that could be one set of reasons. The other set of reason is because, and typically this happens in India, by the way, because my parents told me that I need to be a doctor or an engineer, or you work for Google, or you work for American Express, and I'll just go blindly because there is a peer pressure, there is expectation. I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but I just go with the flow. right? And after, say, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, as the case may be, you realize that no, 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 this is not the thing that I was signing up for. And what I clearly call it as misalignment of responsibility or misalignment of career. That is what triggers this whole phenomena of midlife career crisis.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's very salient point, and I think one worth considering. One of the things that I've also been thinking about is there are definitely specific telltale signs, as you both have pointed out, of what a crisis might look like. And in the current job market and overall industry environment, there are definitely a lot of people, even we have come across, who need to really not just they're not thinking about just thriving, they're thinking about really just surviving in their career right now, from a financial standpoint, from a growth standpoint, opportunity standpoint. But at the same time, we have seen that the general amount of dissatisfaction, Bhavna, this is kind of piggybacking off the point that you were making, lack of fulfillment, right? That's something that we have seen tremendously increase in the last 5 to 10 years. And some of those reasons have been external in nature as well, right? Where people are not just siloed within their own career, they are looking at others.
Yeah.
And Sandeep, I think you alluded to this as well. They're looking at folks around them. So let's
Yeah.
say if I'm doing generally well in my career
Yeah.
as a developer who is, let's say 5 years, 10 years experience and
Yeah.
making somewhere around even 40 LPA or 50 LPA. Now, 5, 10 years ago, that would have been perhaps okay. And
Yeah.
today, because I know from social media and just through my own network that there are many
Yeah.
other folks making, 20% to 50% more than what I do. Plus, some of them are working for maybe, let's say, US based companies while I'm working for an Indian MNC. So, those kind of, comparisons have started to kick in more. And people, even if they're achieving their own goals, they start to move the goalpost, right? So, and when you tie your fulfillment to the goals that you're trying to achieve,
Yeah.
it kind of creates this vicious cycle of always feeling like you're not enough, or you're, forever trying to improve something. And there's good and bad associated to that, in my view. But I would love to understand from Sandeep, you and Bhavna, whoever would like to go first, please feel free. Like, when people are, let's say, moderately successful by objective standards, right? Meaning they have a stable career, decent pay. Oh, we lost Sandeep. I think he might join back.
Mhm.
But yeah, they have, let's say, stable career, decent pay, Bhavna, and
Yeah.
they still feel unhappy. Why has that become such a big phenomenon today, right? People being unhappy despite seemingly on from the outside they should be happy
Yeah.
in their careers.
Yeah. So that's a very good question because when I was preparing for this webinar, right, so I came across so many examples, including Jeff Bezos. Okay, so Jeff Bezos, do you know what he was doing before he started Amazon? So he
Yeah.
was into, yeah, he was in a very stable financial career at DE Shaw, it seems. And then suddenly, so it basically means he was quite successful. He was at VP level. And then he just thought about, okay, maybe I'm done with this and I want to start something else, going with the internet boom, right? So it's really about fulfillment, in the meaning saying, okay, will I be happy to do this every day for the next 10 years? Right. So,
Hmm.
for example, I worked as a product manager building ads. Okay, showing if when somebody searches for Nandini butter, show Amul butter as the first result. Okay, yes, it brought 1 crore of revenue, but okay, is this something which I want to do personally? No, I don't want to do that, right? So, and there's so many examples. Even Dr. Vedumani, a popular influencer, right? So he was in a stable job, government job. He left it and he started his own thyro-care company to do thyroid tests, making it more economical so that everybody can afford. And then,
Hmm.
okay, once it is kind of successful, he's like, okay, no, I think I'm done. This is nice. Now he's into philanthropy and mentorship, right? So it's not like, okay, it's really not just about money anymore.
Right.
You really need that balance because there's no point chasing, okay, 30 LPA, 50 LPA, 60 LPA. But you really need that balance saying, okay, I'm okay with, say, even 30 lakhs per annum, but I want a
Yeah.
fulfilling job. That's how I would say.
Yeah, and just one point, and then Sandeep would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. But one point, you referenced Jeff Bezos, and I think one of the things he said, maybe you have also thought about this, is the regret minimization framework, right? Which is he, at the time he was transitioning from, I believe he used to work at DE Shaw, he was
Yeah.
transitioning to starting Amazon. People often ask him, why did you do that? You had like, I think $250,000 as your salary at like 28, 29 years old. Why would you leave that? And he said, if I didn't do that at that time, I knew later on I would definitely regret not trying it out. And
Yeah.
so he said, most of my decisions today, the larger ones at least, are based on this regret minimization framework. But yeah, Sandeep, I would love to get your thoughts on the same thing. Let me know if you got the gist of our discussion.
No, I lost you guys in between. Sorry about that. Can you just repeat? The
Sure. I'll just briefly talk about what I had mentioned. Basically, we are talking about all of this crisis that people are going through, and some of it is very much present. But at the same time, over the last 5 to 10 years, we have seen that it's increasing in frequency even for people who from the outside should be doing okay. Like when you look at their career from the outside, they seem to be at a good company in a stable career, making decent amount of money, living a comfortable life, but you still see them being dissatisfied and unfulfilled in their careers, right? So are we moving the goalposts too frequently to cause this crisis, this dissatisfaction? Or is this something that's actually real and people need to deal with it rather than deny it?
Yeah, I don't think we are moving the goalpost too often. In my opinion, there are two ways one can actually look at these things. One is a very empowered way of managing my career, and the other one is disempowered way of managing my career. And let me just explain what I mean by both of them. Disempowered way of managing my career is, I have certain skill sets. I've been working actually in a company for last 4, 5, 7 years, and I may or may not like it, but I'll go with the flow. Just because I've spent 6, 7 years, and I am an IT professional now, I would continue to kind of do that just because I believe in disempowered way of living or making career. Whereas empowered way of living or making a career is more about being aware of what I want to do today, tomorrow, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. Bhavana is a great example here, right? I mean, when she came out of college, probably, and I'm just saying without even knowing her career a lot, she wanted to kind of work for a company and then realized because it didn't happen all of a sudden. I'm sure because this was a very empowered way of living or making careers, she knew the milestones. 3, 5 years, 10 years down the line, I'm going to be running my own startup, and so be it. So there is a very structured approach of doing this. So it all depends how you really want to manage this. From the outside in, we may get this feeling everything is great. Why he or she is leaving? Because those were clearly aligned milestones in her mind right from the beginning.
Hmm.
Sometimes it does happen by chance, but not most of the time. Such moves are very well aligned in your mind.
Hmm. Got it. Got it. Yeah, that's good to know. And I think there has been a lot of chatter about like social media causing this kind of dissatisfaction because you get a view into the most successful stories. You don't really see the failures that much for people, so you end up comparing to the top 5%, thinking that's the average level when it's only the top 5%. But I think you're right at the same time, Sandeep. I think because the world is moving so rapidly, it's only natural for people to also move their targets or kind of think about their next move, their next milestone, as Bhavna and you have pointed out. Makes sense. Let's talk about the next thing here, that it's the more emotional side of dealing with different career experiences, right? So a lot of times when people are going through let's say a mid-career crisis and feeling unsure of what their next steps would be, a lot of times they feel just paralyzed and they're not able to actually come to terms with it because they're in a rut, right? They're in a rut of going into work every day, really exhausting themselves out, coming back, and then whatever mental bandwidth they have left, they don't want to focus on the career again. They just spend the entire day, entire week working. So they end up sort of spending years and years being dissatisfied, feeling low, feeling unenergized in their careers, right? How does one tactfully and in an emotionally strong manner deal with this problem, right? How does one firstly come to terms that yes, I need to take, my career in my own hands and do something about it? And secondly, once you have come to terms with it, how do you strategize that, okay, I need to take out time, I need to manage, all the things that are happening within my professional and personal lives around this move that I'm now going to make? So,
Yeah,
Bhavna, we'll start with you since
yeah,
Sandeep just went. If you can share any thoughts both on the, how do you, rather than denying, come to terms with it
yeah.
in a mature way? And then how do you start strategizing your next move?
Yeah, so I would like to give an example, real life example of my friend Vibha. Arjun, you might know her as well because she
Yes,
also
I
went
do.
through the pivot year. So
Yeah.
she is one excellent example. So she started off as an engineer, and then she became a coding instructor. And she also stepped into motherhood, and that's when she was going through this remote work of being a coding instructor. And eventually she realized that is not something which she would want to do for the, let's say, the next 10, 20 years. So she wanted to become a UX designer because she was also, let's say, a creative person and also wanted to be on the business side of things, right? So she has successfully pivoted. Okay, so from engineer to being a coding instructor, and now she's a designer. Okay, and all this while also being a mother to a 5-year-old kid, and also she does agriculture at home. So it is definitely not easy, right? Saying, okay, you do your regular job and also try to pivot, right? Because I appreciate her efforts because while she was coding instructor, she did her courses, online courses, she did certifications on product design, and she also did freelancing. Okay, so that's how she was able to build a portfolio, and eventually she cracked a full-time UX designer job, right? So this is how you do a hybrid approach, because not all of us have the, let's say, the luxury to say, okay, I'll quit my job, I'll do some certifications, I'll do some reading, and then I'll pivot, right? Because it's also about survival, maintaining that financial conditions as well, and then taking this hybrid approach to successfully pivot. So that is one example which I would love to share, and it is really about handling it in a very matured way, right? One thing I would say is reflection. Reflection is very important. Saying, okay, is this what I want to do for the next 10, 15 years at least? And that will actually kind of lead you to exploration, saying, okay, what else can I do? What is where do my interests and strengths align, right? So first thing is self reflection. Is this what I want to do? And then explore, and of course talk to people who have done, let's say, who have been through that journey. That's what I would say, Prakash, Arjun.
Got it. No, very well answered. I like the structure also and the example you shared of Vibha. I mean, we will definitely connect more on Vibha. I mean, her transition has been remarkable, and I love
Yeah.
seeing when people who are ambitious and hardworking, get
Yes.
to a success story. I think it's always very inspiring. But Sandeep, please feel free to chime in on this subject. What are your thoughts about, dealing
Sure.
with the uncertainty and then strategizing how to
Yeah.
come out of that rut?
So, yeah, absolutely. The very first thing, Arjun, I would say is reflect and don't panic. It can happen with anybody. I think the most important piece is if you realize that I'm going through that midlife crisis, just cool down, because detach your identity from your job title. You are much bigger than your job title. I mean, you are. This is not the end of the road, right? I mean, one has to really think very clearly that unfortunately, midlife career crisis does not happen suddenly. It creeps in without even you realizing it. So it's very scary that way. But you don't have to get worried about it. I would like to give an example of bell curve. I am sure most of you are very familiar with the bell curve. So it's like an inverted U. You can say. So typically, when you join a job or a new company at the beginning, your bell curve is right at the bottom as you start going up. the value chain and you start realizing what the company is, what the role is, you are not very satisfied to start with. Let's say this is your first job, and when you come out of college, you say first 2 3 4 months, you'll be juggling with too many balls, so you will not be satisfied. But once you feel settled in, you'll start, your bell curve will start going up. The whole curve is going to be very steep for you, but that's what gives you satisfaction. Once you start plateauing off, you realize that then there is a slope, and you'll be extremely dissatisfied that time. I always tell people, before, while you are at the peak of your career, because you are going to be at the slope also at some point in time, it's a hard fact. So try and kind of start looking at alternatives right there when you're at the peak. Don't wait for the curve to kind of start falling down. And this is your own judgment. I mean, it could be wrong sometimes, but most of the time it'll be right because you know yourself very well. So that's one element of it. The other one, I tell people usually, fight, freeze, or flight. This is a very common phenomenon for people. Either you got to fight it out. When I say fight it out, means either you have to upskill yourself, you have to start looking at opportunities within your organization or outside your organization, but fight it out. Freeze, of course, I'm not a big fan because you're succumbing to the pressure. You will just kind of take it the way it comes, which is not the best position to be in, because all this while you have been in that position, and that's why you've reached that stage of plateauing off, right? And then of course, flight is very simple. You leave the job, or you leave the employer, or you leave the role that you're currently doing, and then do a switch. So I would always, my strategy is 3Fs. Remember that, and that's very easy to kind of um, think about it at what time, which F you are going to be using it. So that's going to be helpful. And then of course, knowing yourself is very, very important. You should understand what are the interventions you would be requiring from time to time. Time around us, technology around us is changing at such an unprecedented pace that you can't believe it. By the time you finish 3 months of your job, there are new technology coming in. So you got to be keeping yourself abreast with what's happening with the latest and the greatest, and keep upskilling yourself. That's very important.
Wow. Lot of good nuggets of wisdom there. Thank you for sharing that. I really like this 3F sort of framework that you pointed out, Sandeep. Sandeep, just a follow up to that, right? How do you decide between the 3Fs? Like, for example, let's say you're in a situation where you're in a predicament. Do I stay in an I've actually seen this happen multiple times, right? I'll give you a very small example. In my first, one of my first roles, there was a person, one of my very close, friends and colleagues, and there was a situation where we weren't sure if she was going to stay within the company and sort of fight all the things that were not working out for her, or she was just going to start looking out for a different role. And it's very hard whenever she would ask for advice or kind of want to learn from others experiences. It's not always that there's one right approach and one wrong approach, right? Sometimes both could work out. So how do you decide? Like it can be a pretty confounding decision to make.
That's a great question, Arjun. I am actually mentoring somebody in the US currently. She's a fairly senior executive, about 25, 27 years of experience, working for an IT firm, has been in the US for the last 25 years. So without taking name of the companies and name, name her, she is doing very well for herself, and she has done pretty well in her career. The reason she came to me is that she has realized the fact that the boss is not the best boss. Okay, she's working for a great brand, one of the best well-known technology companies in the world, and great atmosphere, great culture. So she got into that freeze mode that I just can't do anything about the boss.
Mm,
Unfortunately, I cannot change my boss. Yes, I
mm,
agree, you cannot. Can you take a flight, in the sense, can you change? That's easy, but why should you do that? Because the rest of the components that we are talking about, they are so great in terms of culture, brand, salary.
Hmm.
She herself is doing very well. She has been in the firm for last 15 years or so. So why kind of take the flight? So of course, this is a very tough situation to be in, because I always tell people, you cannot choose either your boss or your parents. you know uh, Sometimes we are fortunate, sometimes we are unfortunate that we have the wrong kind of boss, and those reasons are fatal flaws, in my opinion. But you cannot control it, unfortunately, right? So anything, coming back to your question, anything which you cannot control, and you can only worry about, you observe that this is happening, you will just freeze. You can't do much about this. But the moment you
Yeah.
realize that there is something which is within my control, that's the time you have to start fighting. And when I say
Right.
fighting, you have to start looking alternatives, in terms of upskilling yourself, in terms of looking at lateral moves, in terms of looking at a different role altogether, sometimes even change the industry if required. So it is very subjective, and the person who's actually at the helm has to take that call. Unfortunately, you and me cannot take that call. It's very situational.
Yep. Makes sense. Makes sense. So I think it depends on how much control you have on those particular factors. And I think the other thing would be probably, Sandeep, like how important are those factors to you also? Because sometimes it may not be within your control, but maybe it's not super important. Maybe there are other factors which take more precedence, right? Like for example, let's say you have a huge home loan and you need to keep fulfilling your emis, and the job is paying you in the top 20% of the market range. If your, let's say, boss or your team is not the most congenial to you, there is a chance you might say, you know what, I will stay just for the money, maybe for another year or two, and then maybe think about what I can do. So I think it might also sometimes be about what is most important to you at the present stage of your life and career, right?
And you're spot on, Arjun. Actually, this is what prioritization matrix actually tells us. We need to prioritize in our mind that what my current priorities are. If, let's say, I am at a retirement stage, then I'm kind of, I'm just bothered about creating a legacy for myself, for my family, for my firm. That's it. But if I'm at an early stage of my career and straight out of college, I can afford to take some chances, right? I could jump ship. There's no problem with that. But when you're in 30s and late 40s and all, it becomes very difficult, to your point, because you have additional liability, you have family, you have financial goals, you have a lot of other things to kind of bother about, right? So it is very situational there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for answering those questions. I think that was helpful. Bhavna, I want to segue into our next topic with you now. So, it goes back to the, how we introduced you as part of this, today's session in terms of X turned Y turned Z. Um, right. So, and I think there is a flavor of that in all of our profiles here. So, people who have joined us might find this interesting that there are actually three people in the room have had multiple careers, worn multiple hats. Now, I have had my reasons to turn from X to Y and Z, and I'm sure you did. You had yours, and Sandeep had his. Um, Wanted to learn more. How did you decide to, whenever you were presented multiple choices in your career, right, where you could stay within the job, you could go to a different company but in the same type of role, or you could completely alter your path, right? Meaning a shift to a new type of profile, like engineering to PM or to founder. What were some of the key frameworks or decision making criteria that helped you feel confident that, yes, I need to do this at this stage? Otherwise, I won't be optimizing my future. So, can you share a little bit more around that?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I'll give you my example. I started off as a software test engineer, and I worked in that role for about 2.5 years. And then I got an opportunity to transition to product management. And there was no criteria, no frameworks. Okay. So, very straightforward reason. I never liked coding, and I always wanted to be, let's say, on the business side of things. So, that's why I was like, okay, I don't like coding. Okay, Tata, bye bye, software testing. I'm going to be a product manager. So that was a very easy thing for me to do. And of course, PM jobs is one of like the hot cake jobs in the industry, of course. And being an entrepreneur, this was a very tough one because everybody questioned, including family members as well, because I was in postpartum. Like my baby was just 5 months old when I started
Oh,
Kraanthi. And everybody was like, okay, do you really need to do this right now? You're already going through a lot. Any mother would go through a lot in the postpartum phase. Um, but then what made me start is probably this is the best time because I'm not working, because going to, let's say, a 9 to 5 job and also, let's say, taking care of the baby and starting up, not going to happen. Probably this is the best time where I can like get started and set things up. So that's how I thought about it. And another thing is this is more for long term, right? So I'm not expecting like exponential growth, hockey stick growth in the next 1 or 2 years. It's really aligned with my husband's vision as well, because he wants to be a farmer. So he's an infrastructure engineer and he wants to pivot to
wow.
becoming an organic farmer. Can you
That's
believe
quite a
that?
180-degree.
So yes, absolutely. And there are people who are successful. You know, Organic Mandya is one of the best brands in Karnataka now. So the founder, Madhu Chandan, he has been in the US. He's been a founder of a very successful software company. And then he visited India and he just saw the health concerns which are like rising exponentially, and he said okay, and farmers are suiciding. So he said okay, time to change, time to break free from corporate, and he became an organic farmer. And today his brand is worth 200 crores per year.
Wow.
So any pivot is possible, especially like engineering to farming, that is also possible. And in my case, I started Kranti because I am playing to my strengths. Because I've been in Big Basket, I understand how e-commerce works, how I can, let's say, use some of those learnings and incorporate it for Kranti. So
Got
I
it.
had that confidence, saying I use that strength, use that experience, and now I want to do that for my own brand, slowly and steadily.
So, that's
Yeah.
excellent. I think one of the things that I want to sort of extract as an insight from your, journey.
Hmm.
I think there are different
Hmm.
times that you will experience, different career decisions, and depending on what
Yeah.
stage you are in, you might make the decision
Yeah.
with different factors in mind. Like for example, the first one was mostly motivated based on, hey, I want to do something that is more attractive because of the, it's trending in the market, it's maybe better paying,
Yeah.
it's
And no
no
coding.
coding, yeah,
Yeah,
something you
that
were
was
trying
like
to move
number
away from.
one.
Exactly. So that was the initial reason,
Yes,
and then the
yes.
second one seems to be more
Yeah.
impact driven, right? Like you want to create a certain kind of impact. um, you're
Yes.
trying to play to your strengths, as you said. So this is more of an
Yeah.
opportunistic move as opposed to, I want to get away from something.
Yes.
um, right. So
Yes.
I think that's a
Exactly.
very good point, and we frequently see this, Bhavna, because sometimes people feel that they're being
Mhm.
told by the society that you cannot do this
Mm.
because um, it's not the right thing. For example, leaving something just because you don't like it is not the right thing in the current job market, because the job market is tight and you should just be grateful that you have a job.
Yeah.
And so they're sort
Yes.
of made to feel
Yes.
guilty almost to give up
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
their existing career. And there's this sunk cost fallacy, which is pretty popular out there, where
Yes.
it says, if you have spent enough time doing something,
Yeah.
people generally think, oh, if I move to the something else, I would be giving up
Yeah.
entirely everything that I have done so far in my career.
Yeah.
But it's a
Yeah.
fallacy, because
Yeah.
you don't leave everything behind. Even if you're shifting careers, like you said,
Yes.
you're playing to your strengths even though you're shifting profiles,
Yeah.
right? So anyways, thank you for sharing
Yes.
that. I think that was very insightful, and I hope helpful to people who are thinking about a
Yeah.
career shift. um, Sandeep, would
Yeah.
love to understand from you as well. I mean, you have been doing both things, right? You have been transitioning in your own career. You've had a very successful and long career as well, but you're helping others too. And you're probably seeing different stories play out in different ways. So again, going back to the same question that I had with Bhavna, right? We are trying to pull in these uh, insights and decision making factors that can help people feel more confident that this is what I should do going forward, and not remain in a state of limbo and confusion, whether I'm in the right career or not.
Yeah. So, Arjun, what happens is a lot depends on your driving force. What is really driving you to shift or pivot? I'll tell you in my own case, when I was in Ireland, when I was running Fidelity in Ireland, and after 5.5 years, decided to come back to India. For me, I was very, very clear that by then I had close to about 27, 28 years of experience. I said, whatever I've learned, it's time for me to give back to the society. Can I really contribute in a way? Of course, I mean, it's my bread and butter. But the driving force was not the money there for me. The driving force was that the experience that I've gained through this process, and can I start sharing it with people? Can people be kind of taking advantage of my own wisdom, so to say? And that was the trigger point for me. There was nothing else, of course. And then when I started building this business, and when I started kind of working for the consulting firm, I started liking it. I mean, I became passionate about it. But that was not the trigger point for me. The trigger point was clearly that 26, 27 years of experience, come back home now to India. What can I do differently? How can I be of any help to people? Then, of course, we created a business out of it. But yeah, I mean, that was the real reason for us to kind of get into this.
Got it. Super helpful. I think we have only a few minutes left, and I see a barrage of questions in the chat. So I would love to start taking those up. I apologize for staying with their three people discussion so far. So I would love to involve the questions that have been shared from audience members. The first one I'll just put on the screen here. It's from Shirish, and the question is, symptoms of a mid-career crisis can be similar to the crisis originating after a career pivot. Um, okay, interesting. And so, how should one identify and navigate through the career change crisis successfully? If I could maybe rephrase this for the benefit of entire audience here, what I think he is probably referring to is the fact that sometimes when you make a career pivot, things are not hunky dory right away, right? I experienced that. I'm sure perhaps both of you have seen that. You take a lot of courage and you strategize, and then you start to bring it all
Yeah.
together, only to realize, okay, I'm I know a lot, but at the same time, there are many unknown factors, and I will need to
Yeah.
learn many new things. And because the world is anyways rapidly advancing, there could be a lot of uncertainty around that as well. So perhaps the question is trying to get at, it's not just about making the decision, but how do you stick to with that decision over a period of time to
Yeah.
see it through. um, and feel free to answer, Bhavna or Sandeep, like in your own your perception of this question. Like if you see any other points that you think might be valid, feel free to add. I think we have discussed a lot, by the way. I would just say, there are a lot of things we have already discussed with
Mhm.
regard to identifying the signs and what to do. But if there's anything else you would like to add, and specifically to Shirish's question, that would help.
So my take on this, Shreesh, is that when you change tracks, it's a very natural phenomena that you will not be comfortable to start with, even on the new track, because you are out of your comfort zone. You have been actually working in certain pattern in an organization with with certain co-workers. Of course, when you either pivot in the form of a new job, or like Bhavna, you are getting onto a completely different track and starting your own business. You will be, and that's the right way to kind of judge that. You can't be comfortable right from day one, to answer your question. Yes, I mean, gradually when you get onto that mode of running it, from crawling to walking into running, your pains will get reduced, definitely, because your experience will come in handy, and you will start judging those issues and challenges more proactively rather than reactively. So it's a very natural phenomenon. I would not worry too much about it.
Yes, I would agree to that as well. What I'll say is, the journey might be tough, but it is rewarding at the end of the day, right? So maybe, let's say, whenever you're pivoting, for example, I did telecommunication engineering, and when I became a software test engineer, I didn't even know what testing is. I didn't even know a bit of coding, but I just said, yes, okay, I'm going to do this job because I need that money. And then when I became a product manager, again, I didn't even know anything from, let's say, business thinking perspective or product thinking perspective, or even from design. Okay, all I knew was, okay, APIs, client server, this is what I knew. I was like, okay, I know something at least, and let me start from there. So it's really about taking that first step and moving ahead, giving it at least a few years. You never know, might be you might not want to do that as well, and you might change again. That has also happened, right? So I think the idea is to get started, explore, be open to learning. And Shirish is one of my connections on LinkedIn. She works very well for Kraanthi. So she has been that PhD dropout. She's a scientist, and now she is into content writing,
Mm.
right? So there. There are questions. There will always be questions. Am I in the right direction now, even when you pivot, right? So it's about giving it some more time, giving it a few years, and again, self reflection, and that would really help, because at this point in time, I might want to go back into product management as well, because I do love that. And at the same time, I also want to be a public speaker. I want to get there. So there are a lot of questions. The idea is to experiment, explore, give it a few years, and then decide.
And
Fair
I
point.
would just like to add one more thing. Usually, in a career, I put this into maybe 5 or 6 different buckets. First is your discovery phase, then comes your promise phase, and then is your experiential value phase. You have the harvest phase, you have the relevancy phase, and then of course you create a legacy. So it depends which phase of life you are in, and based on that. But the fortunate or the unfortunate part is that when you do your humble beginning, you will be back to discovery phase, and it doesn't really matter. So what, I at this age, let's say, if I want to kind of start something new, I mean, I won't shy about this. I mean, I will discover my own way, the challenges associated with it. But I know that, the goalpost, which is visible to me, which could be far away today, but 5 years down the line, I know that I'm going to be accomplishing that. So we should be very, very clear about that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fair point. All right, let's take the other question here. All right. So this one's about, basically trying to navigate a career gap, I would say. And that's, something we didn't really address head on during the course of this conversation. So I'm very glad this came up, because a lot of times, for example, Bhavna, you've taken a bit of a gap, I would imagine, during your parental phase,
Yeah, yeah,
maternity leave and stuff. And but I don't know,
yes.
Sandeep, if you ever went through any sort of a sabbatical. I have not really myself, maybe apart from 2 months.
Mhm.
But yeah, it would be good to understand how to navigate this, because if you're trying to get back into the job market, see, you're competing against people who don't have gaps, right? So your profile,
Yes,
whether or not you like it, it does face some bias in the job market, right?
yes.
You might have a lot of the skills, you might be very well qualified, but because of that gap, people might consider you flaky just because that's the bias, right? So how do we break that bias?
That's very true. In fact, I should say I'm experiencing it. So right now, as an entrepreneur, also, I have some, let's say, financial pressures that I may have to get back into corporate. So this will be like my side project, Kranti. So now, even when I'm applying, I am trying to mention that I built Kranti in my maternity break. So that's how I am trying to compensate to, or let's say, face this bias. Okay, saying, okay, this is what I did, even though I've taken break, or let's say almost more than 14 months of break. I'm trying to say that, okay, look, I tried to build something, shows my initiative, shows the practical, I mean, the website is there, people can see it, right? So what I would say is, even if you have taken a break of 6 months or even 1 year, always try to showcase what incremental value or what incremental skills have you learned in that time, right? If not, you've, let's say, you've not been productive the whole year, let's say even one or two certifications that you did,
Mhm.
try to put up, let's say, some learnings what you did from that certification, and say, look, this is how I upskilled myself in this break while I was going through something in my personal journey.
Got it.
I would add a different angle to this. I didn't have any occasion where there was a break in my career, but I would sit on the other side of the table, being an interviewer, and have managed candidates and seen candidates where people have taken breaks. So I will give you that perspective. So I strongly feel when I'm interviewing somebody and people have taken break 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, I strongly feel that this is a level playing field for everyone. Doesn't matter if you've taken a break of 6 months or 12 months. As Bhavana rightly said, I will get worried as an interviewer in case you are just sitting idle and not doing. Even if you tell me that I was trekking for 12 months, so be it. There's nothing wrong in that as a hobby, right? As a passion. Or I was flying. I was trying to learn flying. I went to a trip to Europe. Be honest to the interviewer. And if you have had any kind of additional skill sets during this period, of course, say that. That's a bonus. But if not, say upfront that no, sorry, I didn't get time because I want to spend time with my family, or I want to kind of do cooking for 3 months, 6 months. I got bored and I want to get back to the corporate world. Absolutely acceptable. Trust me, I'm telling you. I probably interviewed 10,000 people in my life. This is acceptable norm. Yes, of course, if you're not done anything, you should be able to kind of sell your profile very, very clearly. What that you are doing.
Right,
If you're
right.
just watching, YouTube and you're on social media, of course, I will not accept that as an interviewer. I'll say thank you so much.
Unless you became an influencer while watching
Yeah,
YouTube.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think very valid points, Sandeep. I do feel, people will still feel demoralized when they get a lot of rejections because I see this a lot. There are new parents returning to the workforce or people who have tried to start a business, didn't work out, returning to the workforce. You're going to get a lot of rejections. You're going to get a lot of ghosting. But again, that is
Yeah.
part of the process. There's nothing personal against you.
Yes.
You might get 100
Yes.
no's, but then you will get a one yes. You just need to make sure, the insights that are
Yeah.
being shared by Bhavna and Sandeep today, you try and imbibe those and apply them in case you're going through such a situation. It's very important to keep a resilient mindset during these times. Otherwise, you go into a spiral, and that's not going to help anybody, especially you. All right, we have time for probably just one or two more quick questions, if that's okay with both of you. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Of
we
course.
have one from Sagata here, which is I'm not sure what point or what question I had asked earlier, but it was about when restructuring or I guess downsizing happens, uh, candidates don't always get a matching salary in this current job market. Very true. Very true. We have
Yeah.
seen actually, we have worked with people from Mang companies, right? The Metas and Amazons of the world, paying at the top 5% of the market. Now,
Yeah.
some of the people who have gotten laid off were making, obscene amount of money, as they would say. There is no replacement for that in the current job market for a lot of times, right? How do you handle such situations from your experience? Do you just compromise on the salary and you just say, okay, I'll take whatever comes to me, or do you wait it out and make sure you don't take a cut in your compensation?
Yeah, I would go back to the earlier model that I spoke about, three Fs. Either you fight, freeze, or flight. It depends on you, your personal situation. How much and what all you can afford to kind of do at this stage in terms of your decision making, because situations are different for different people. Sometimes you got to accept it. If the job market, for example, is bad, and even if there's a salary cut, you sit tight. I mean, there's nothing wrong in that. I mean, you should be happy and you should be thankful to God that you could survive the riff, and you have a job, maybe 10%, 15% cut, and when the time comes, make a shift. That time you take the flight. No, you don't have to fight every time, and just accept the fact that this is the way it is. And organizations understand that today or tomorrow this guy will leave. If you're a high pot in the organization and they have done a salary cut, they will either give you that salary back at some point in time when the situation becomes better, or otherwise they know that the guy is going to leave, which is fine.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. I would have a similar view on this, that take that job, and then of course you can keep applying and keep doing your networking, and then when you get that right offer, you can always make that switch. So I have a very similar situation to what Sagatha has mentioned. So like whatever salary that I was earning 4 years back as well, even now if I ask that salary, I am not getting that. Okay, so the way that I'm looking at is, okay, I'm okay to take, let's say, a dip in my salary, but at least I want it to be fulfilling. So the way I've decided is, even if I get back into corporate, I would love to work for, let's say, companies which are actively driving sustainability. At least, okay, somewhere I should be able to balancing, even if I'm taking that little bit of cut, I am making social impact, I'm making some environmental impact, and that is how I would console myself and be happy.
All right. Okay, great. Thank you so much, both, for sharing your all your thoughts, all your experiences and insights. I think it was a great learning experience for me, and I hope folks who joined us today. Um, there are a couple of more questions, and I feel bad that we couldn't take them up, but this is the opportunity I would say to people who wanted to get their questions answered to please reach out
Yeah,
directly to Bhavna
yeah,
or Sandeep. They are both
yeah,
on LinkedIn. You can easily look up their
yeah,
profiles because we are hosting this on LinkedIn Live. So you probably see, their links. Click on it, connect with them, reach out in case there is something they can help you with or answer your questions. Also, feel free to check out Pivot, where the link for the website is in my signature here, in case you're contemplating a transition. We have a fairly holistic program that takes care of everything from clarity to networking to job applications, interview prep, and getting referrals and getting placed. So feel free to check these resources out. I hope everybody had a insightful session, and special thanks to Sandeep and Bhavna again for joining me. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to all you guys, and love the interaction through the chat, and of course, Arjun, you have been a
yeah.
wonderful host. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Yeah, same here. Thank you, Arjun and Pivot team. I'm happy to answer all the questions which have been in the chat via DMs on LinkedIn. And one last thing to answer the last part of the session was effective ways to handle this pivoting is mentorship. That would be the first thing in case you're trying to make a hard pivot, something which is totally different. Mentoring, getting to a right mentor and being inspired by their journey, knowing how they did it, that's what matters. So definitely check out Pivot. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a good